Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well. This is the 5th video in the internal style concept series, my effort toward presenting common internal style concepts. After introducing Wang Yangming, the philosopher who promoted the concept of Zhi, Xing, Ge-Wu-Zhi-Zhi, or the unity of knowledge and action, I talked to a student of mine, Christopher McGrath, a philosophy professor at University of Ottawa, about this video. In our conversation, both of us realized that it was worthwhile to introduce Zhu Xi, another very preeminent Neo-Confucian philosopher, earlier about 300 years than Wang Yangming. One of Zhu Xi's philosophical concepts is Ge-Wu-Zhi-Zhi, which has an important impact on the development of Chinese internal practice. By the way, I intentionally pronounce Chinese terms, including names of people, the Mandarin way. Some of you may find it strange to hear initially, but just get used to this. One day, you may be able to say it the Mandarin way as well. Of course, I will offer English translations whenever relevant, and I will do my best to say them correctly. Again, understanding these philosophical concepts will only help you understand internal practice better. As I said before, the internal styles are very rich in martial theories and concepts. Moreover, they are integrated into practice of the style itself, which makes learning them more important than in other styles. So, please take your time to contemplate on these topics and try to consciously focus on a particular concept during practice, and I'm sure your practice will improve with time. So, topics covered in today's video include: first, Zhu Xi and Ge-Wu-Zhi-Zhi; second, Ge-Wu-Zhi-Zhi and martial art; third, long force and short force; fourth, Ben Li and Gong Li; fifth, principles of long force and short force practice; sixth, demonstration; and seventh, takeaways. Let's get started. Topic 1. Zhu Xi and Ge-Wu-Zhi-Zhi. I have briefly introduced Zhu Xi in my video on the introduction of a beginning form. Link is in the description. In today's video, I will talk about Zhu Xi and his philosophy. By the way, I recommend you try to remember his name and his philosophy. The significance in martial art aside, it's good for showing off, especially if you are not Chinese, since these days even most Chinese people don't know about him or his work. So, who was Zhu Xi? Zhu Xi was the preeminent Neo-Confucian scholar from 1130 to 1200 CE. He is generally ranked second only to Confucius himself in influence, the philosophical achievement, and the contribution in the Chinese philosophical tradition. More importantly, Zhu Xi compiled, edited, and commented on a compendium of essential Confucian texts, commonly called 四书五经, or 4 books and 5 classics. His hard work on Confucian's texts became the basis of the imperial examination system later on. Those works were in effort for about 700 years until the termination of the imperial examination system at the end of the Qing dynasty. Zhu Xi's initiative was to restore the original ideas of Confucius, including personal ethical cultivation, realization, and practice. This is why people believe that Zhu Xi's spirit and thought were deeply rooted in the original teachings of Confucius and his early schools. Due to his contribution, his philosophy had a profound influence in China and around East Asia for centuries. Now then, what was his philosophy? Well, Zhu Xi contributed to many different philosophical areas like human nature, approach to self-cultivation, natural philosophy, and ethical philosophy. Interestingly, he even created a form of meditation different from the other styles of his time. I will introduce his practice in the future. Like I said in my prior video on the beginning form, Zhu Xi believed that all things in the universe are brought into being by the union of two factors. One is qi, or vital energy, and the other one is Li, or rational principle. The source and sum of Li is taiji, or the superior ultimate. I believe his major contribution to be in ethical and natural philosophies. Of course, he created different theories to explain his philosophical system. One of them is Ge-Wu-Zhi-Zhi, which is the title of this topic. I will introduce this term since it is to a certain extent directly related to martial practice. So, what is Ge-Wu-Zhi-Zhi? Ge means investigate. Wu means things. The former Zhi means attain, while the later Zhi means knowledge. So, Ge-Wu-Zhi-Zhi means investigate things to attain knowledge. Zhu Xi claimed that the things in Ge-Wu-Zhi-Zhi were moral principles, and the investigation involved paying attention to everything in both literature as well as daily affairs because of the concept of Li. In other words, moral principles are inexhaustible. Also, some scholars interpret his concept as a method of inquiry as essentially a process of hypothesis and verification by evidence. It is very hard to do justice to the topic of Zhu Xi and his contribution without going into a lot of detail. But in the interest of time, let's summarize his main contribution, Ge-Wu-Zhi-Zhi, which means investigate things to attain knowledge. Now, you may wonder why a martial artist should care about this. That brings us to the next topic. Topic 2, Ge-Wu-Zhi-Zhi and the martial art practice. Any internal style is essentially an integrated practice of the body as well as the mind. In other words, it is physical as well as psychological. When analyzing the traditional Chinese martial arts, especially their internal styles, we can notice that this concept has been applied in many aspects. For example, when reading any classic martial training manuals, you will see that martial principles and practice are never mentioned in isolation. They are always integrated into a holistic practice. This perfectly reflects the concept of Ge-Wu-Zhi-Zhi. Let me be clear, I'm only talking about the classic martial training documents, which have stood the test of time, not the run-of-the-mill documents that are spread everywhere like a disease these days. By the way, a quick comment about the latter category of documents. I'm often asked for my opinion on many recent martial art books and videos. I will not name any names, but let me make a general comment. No matter how appealing or flowery your word, if you cannot back them up with effective practice, then your words are just noise. If your practice does not reflect an understanding of the principles, then your word means nothing. This is not an attack on you in case your work fits the description, but rather a wake-up call to improve your practice and also to observe honesty in thought and action. Anyway, let's get back to our topics. So, like I mentioned before, 格物致知 means investigate things to attain knowledge. Now, that gives rise to the many questions. What to investigate? How to investigate? What is knowledge? What does it mean to attain knowledge? I'd like to share my opinion with you. What to investigate? In internal style training, basically, we investigate the correctness, effectiveness, and the efficiency of a movement. How to investigate? We investigate by analyzing and paying attention to the details, including both physical movement and theoretical concepts. What is knowledge? Knowledge is the first-hand experience gained through practice instead of imagination and passive observation. It is related to practice methodology, and I will talk about it in a future video. What does it mean to attain knowledge? To attain knowledge means to fully understand and internalize it. It means that you not only understand the practice, but also your practice clearly reflects the theoretical knowledge. As for the knowledge, it should be attained through practice instead of imagination and observation. To summarize, I believe that externally, you should investigate anything and everything related to practice, while internally, you should acquire and internalize knowledge through physical practice, which is the real attainment of knowledge. This concept can be applied at the self-cultivation level as well, and I will introduce it in the future. By the way, since we are on the subject of investigation and attainment of knowledge, let me explain it using the concept of different types of forces, which I will talk about in the following topics. Please pay attention here that in order to understand and master the practice and application of a different type of forces, you absolutely have to physically test it on a willing partner. Force practice will be incomplete without partner feedback. In other words, you have to investigate its effectiveness in order to attain the knowledge, which is exactly 格物致知. Now, let's move on to the next topic. Topic 3. Long force and short force. In martial art training, you can distinguish forces into two broad categories, the long force and the short force. In the community, it is a very common method of categorization because it's critical to know the differences between them and practice them correctly. In Mandarin, the long force is called 长劲. 长 means long, and 劲 means force. Sometimes people also use the word power instead of force. but I prefer to use the term force to express it due to the nature of the practice. The short force is called 短劲. 短 means short, and 劲 means force. Even though the long and short forces are a commonly known pair of terms, I still think that many people in the West have a hard time to applying it correctly, at least going by first-hand teaching experience. In general, long force is a type of force that, first, stay longer with the opponent, and two, feels like a push. Very often, long force involves both the initiator and the acceptor to shift their body weights. Normally, practitioners begin with practicing the long force in the early stages for the simple reason that the long force is much easier to issue and a lot quicker to master. As for the short force, it is a lot harder to achieve than the long force. Based on my teaching experience, it will take a lot more effort over a longer period of time to master the practice of a short force. So, short force is the type of force that 1. Stay with the opponent for a very short time, or a sudden, impulsive force. Second, a quick yet powerful force that can penetrate the opponent's body if managed well. Very often, short force is issued so fast that there's no body weight shifting during execution. The short force should be practiced only after you master the long force. Mastering the short force is an essential step for anyone who wants to be considered an expert martial artist. To summarize, there are differences between the long force and the short force. The long force practice is the foundation of the short force practice. Again, you have to practice both of them. I hope in the future that you will pay attention to differentiating these two types of forces in practice. It is an important skill. Of course, it should come from first-hand testing or investigation. In other words, 格物致知. Topic 4. 本力 and 功力. These two terms were very popular back when I was a child in China. But at least for the last decade, I have not heard much about it. It seems that many people in our community have forgotten about them. So I'd like to introduce them if you have not heard about them before. Let me explain them one by one. The term 本力 is used to describe someone's physical force. Sometimes it also can be used to imply that one is naturally strong. 本 means native, original. 力 means force. So together, it means the native force of someone. It can be achieved through martial practice or any other physical exercise. The term 功力 is used to describe someone's skill or talent achieved through martial training that is beyond the physical force. 功 means practice or skill. It is the same word used in the term kung fu. Kung is the Cantonese pronunciation, while in Mandarin it is gong. So kung fu in Cantonese is pronounced kung fu in Mandarin. Li means force. If 本力 is considered physical strength, then 功力 would be considered martial strength. One can be very strong in 本力, but not necessarily in 功力, since 功力 requires special martial training. By the way, many people claim to practice martial art. Unfortunately, a lot of them neither have enough 本力 nor possess any 功力. The reason is very simple. They do not practice correctly. As a martial artist, you need to have some strong muscle, cardio, speed, and many other factors. Please remember, martial art practice is not a magic show. It requires sweat, effort, and often frustration. But of course, it can offer health, happiness, and satisfaction. To summarize, one has to be able to differentiate between 本力 and 功力. For a martial artist, we need both, even though at a higher level, 功力 would be more important than 本力. Topic 5. Principles of long force and short force practice. After introducing the different type of forces, long force and short forces, native and martial forces, I'd like to introduce some important principles for practice and application in self-defense situations. I created 6 proverbs divided into 3 pairs for clearer understanding. I will read them in Mandarin first, then read the English version after. In Mandarin, 长进要跟，短进要透，短进长发，长进短颤，外在肢体，内在意念。In English, long force follows the opponent, short force penetrates it. Second, short force has a long effect. Short force follows long force. Third, externally physical, internally psychological. Now, let me explain them one by one. First, long force follows the opponent. Short force penetrates it. The key point for applying the long force is to follow the opponent. To apply the short force, one penetrates the opponent with it. Since the nature of the long force is a comparatively prolonged push, the objective is to displace the opponent or shift their center of gravity. Therefore, the part of the attacker's body used for pushing, such as the hand, should maintain contact with the opponent's body as long as possible before issuing the final pushing motion. To do this, very often, the center of the gravity of the initiator will have to change as well in order to strengthen the effort. A common saying is, use your body weight to release the pushing force. However, the short force is different. Since the nature of the short force is a quick penetration that can cause damage to the area of the contact with the opponent, it has to be applied a lot faster than the long force. Also, the long force depends mostly on 本力 or the native force, while the short force almost entirely depends on 功力 or martial force. So, compared to the long force, the short force is way more difficult to achieve. Unfortunately, most of the internal style practitioners these days only practice the long force and ignore the short force. You can see this in their routines as well. This is why I recommend you pay attention to short force practice in your daily routine. Second, short force has a long effect. Short force follows long force. At a higher level of practice, short force can also cause the effect of a long force. In Mandarin, it is called 短进长发, or short force with long force effect. This is a high level of practice and needs years of training to execute perfectly. However, it is much easier to have a shorter force effect in long force practice. You simply need to add shorter force motion at the end of the long force releasing movement, and that's it. By the way, in the internal styles, people always talk about Fajin or Fali. So what type of a force between long force and the shorter force is used for Fajin? The answer is very simple. It is the short force. You can never achieve Fajin from a long force training only. If you think long force training alone will let you achieve Fajin, then you are only fooling yourself, because that is not. In other words, there are some roads that don't lead to Rome. 3. Externally physical, internally psychological. Externally, the movements depends on the body, while internally they really depends on the mind. I would like to emphasize again on the importance of the mind or intention in martial art practice. Of course, there's the physical aspect in practice, but to reach a high level, intention or mental activity is the key. You absolutely need to coordinate your movement with your mind in order to reach a high level of managing forces. Especially the shorter force practicing the mind is something I will leave for a future video. So, if I were you, at this moment, I would find a training partner right away and investigate the different type of forces. Again, let me remind you, the concept to keep in mind is 知觉悟知之, or investigate things to attain knowledge. Topic 6. Demonstration. Today, I'd like to demonstrate the effect of the long and the short forces. Hello, let me demonstrate the long force and the short force with one of my students. So, first one is the long force. The key principle of long force is that our hand, our body part stays with our components as long as we can. So I will use the maybe Bagua movement to demonstrate it. Okay, so we come to here, the block, then it stay longer, right? A long force. Then now let me demonstrate the short force. Short force normally doesn't involve the weight transfer. And in order to be safe, I will push my arm, then my arm connect his body. Otherwise, sometimes it may not be that safe if I directly push someone's chest. So come to here to block, then right, that's the short force. And even more to block, then right, this kind of force, short force. And then now the third one, I would like to demonstrate the short force effect in the end of the long force movement. So still similar movement, but in the end, put a little bit of short force. So you come in, then I get here, then you just put him, right, strike with the short force effect in the end of the long force movement. Topic 7. Takeaways. This video covered a lot of interesting topics. Zhu Xi and his philosophy, Ge-Wu-Zhi-Zhi, and its impact on Chinese martial art development. Second, different type of forces, long and short, native and martial. 3. Key principles to practice and apply these forces along with transformed effort for each force. 4th, demonstration of different forces. That brings us to the end of today's video. Thanks for watching, see you next time, and enjoy your practice.